Time now for Backpages Tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Joining us are the Times chief sports reporter Martin Ziegler and the Daily Mail's North East football correspondent Craig Hope. Welcome to you both. Let's quickly run you through the back pages. Right, here is the back pages of the Times, looking at new threat to Saturday 3 p.m. blackout. The Mail is the next paper, and leading with "We're coming for you, Pep." They've also got that 3 p.m. blackout story there in The Guardian. It's all about the new Leicester manager who is stung by his enforced United exit. And, of course, a focus on West Ham, on the right-hand side there. And then on the Eye, it's we've had enough. Fans talking about putting aside their differences in order to battle against ticket prices. I'm going to start with that story at the back of the Times. And Martin, you'll lead us on this one. The new threat to Saturday 3 p.m. blackout. What is that all about?
Yeah, this is this sort of historic rule that's been in place since the 80s, where no live TV can be shown in the UK on Saturday afternoons. The idea originally was to protect attendances at grassroots football, but I think there's senior football figures I've spoken to say that there's the increasing feeling it's a bit of an anachronism. It's past its use-by date. And you have this strange situation where fans in the USA, for example, can watch every Premier League match, but fans in the UK can't. So I think the pressure is going to intensify for the next round of TV deals that the Saturday 3 p.m. blackout no longer applies.
Craig, I know that your paper's also gone with this story. What's your take on it? And what's the kind of time frame that Martin hinted on there? When are we looking at this potentially starting?
Well, yeah, to answer that quickly first, it would be 29-30, I think, coming out of this decade is when the deals are up for renewal and we would see potentially, or most likely, a change. Now, it's a good story, Martin, but it's bad news. And I realise I'm probably fighting a losing battle here, perhaps in the minority. I'm almost resigned to this 3 p.m. blackout going, but and I realise I'm saying this on Sky Sports, by the way, but I want to see less football on television, not more. I really do. And as someone who goes to non-league games, as someone who takes my little boys to non-league games and lower league matches, I really do think this is a genuine concern that attendances would be hit. And to give you just a little vignette, I was at Newcastle Crystal Palace down at Selhurst Park on Saturday afternoon, and my oldest boy texted me saying, "Where's it on TV? Where can I watch it?" And I said, well, no, thankfully it's not on television. Do something else. And come tea time, my wife had sent me some lovely pictures of the boys putting up the Christmas tree there over my shoulder. Do something else. You don't have to watch football all the time. Saturday afternoons are for doing. And I do think we're in danger now of there just being far too much. But as I said at the top there, I do think it's inevitable and it is coming down the tracks for all the reasons Martin outlined, as much as I personally don't want to see it.
I was shocked. I live in South Africa and I can watch all 380 Premier League games live. I move over to England. I can't see a 3 p.m. kickoff within walking distance. So I don't quite understand it. Craig, you're on the other side. You don't want to see the 3 p.m. games live. You say there's too much football on TV. What's your biggest fear?
Well, traditionally, this goes back to the 1960s, and the intention was to safeguard against attendances. And the fears I've got are twofold. I just want I'm coming at this from, I've got a couple of dogs in the fight here. Selfishly, as a journalist, I quite like being in a 3 p.m. game when the world isn't watching it, and perhaps my words and my take from it and my report carries a little bit more weight, because that's all folk have got to go at. But I see it more from looking at my children and a generational thing, really, that they can watch football on a Sunday afternoon. They can watch football on a Monday, a Tuesday, a Wednesday night. Let's just keep something sacred. If you want to watch football on a Saturday, get out the house and go and watch it even if that's a Premier League game, that's fine. Be it League One or non-league like I go to. I think it's the 7th tier, Heaton Stannington. I take my boys to and they love it. Will they want to do that if they can watch Newcastle away on telly at 3 o'clock on a Saturday? They probably won't, and that's what I want to safeguard against.
Martin, just final question on this topic. Having a quick look at your article here, and you're talking about the blackout being determined by UEFA's article. You know, can you see the 3 p.m. kickoffs elsewhere around Europe? Is England kind of the last place and the UK the last place where you can't? What other technicalities have you included in the story?
Yeah, there used to be quite a few countries that had this in, and UEFA, they apply it through their articles, but it has to be applied to by each individual football association. So the English FA apply to this with the sort of backing of the Premier League and the EFL. One by one, these have all dwindled in fact now. So basically, the UK is the only country left which actually applies for this, and is granted this blackout. I think. I can understand why people are reluctant to see it go, but I think that during the 1980s, attendances were really struggling. Football was in a terrible place in England, but since then, I mean, attendances they're going up and up. You know, people love the event of going to see something live. So I actually don't think it's going to hit attendances that much when it does go. I mean, I do think perhaps a concern is perhaps grassroots football. You know, the village teams who play on a Saturday afternoon. I quite often go and watch my local one in the Yorkshire League, and I can see there might be a bit of a worry, people sort of turning their backs on playing if there's big matches to watch on TV. But I just think it's, as you say, coming from South Africa, you think, you know, what's going on here? And I think people increasingly feel like that. And there's also an issue of some people trying to access it on illegal streams. And I'm sure broadcasters don't like that either.
Not at all. Well, the other story really dominating is Ruud van Nistelrooy having his first press conference now as the Leicester City manager. But the other part of the press conference he talked about was his hurt. That's in the back page of The Guardian as well as telegraph.co.uk, both of them using the word hurt, you know, the fact that he was stung by his enforced United exit. What can you tell us about this, Craig?
Yeah, well, I think when Ruud van Nistelrooy went and joined Manchester United as number 2 to Erik ten Hag in the summer, I think there was an assumption that was actually borne out within a couple of months that Ruud van Nistelrooy would become Manchester United caretaker manager, and then by extension might actually get a run at the job like we've seen previously. And his caretaker stint actually was probably good enough for him to stay there. But Ruben Amorim made that decision. I think it was probably the right decision. He was decisive with it. Van Nistelrooy's revealed in his press conference today that Amorim did it in a respectful way, man to man. He spoke very warmly about him, but nonetheless he did express his hurt. And, you know, he's got a hell of his job on his hands at Leicester now. If you look at what they did down at Brentford on Saturday, I know they're still out of that bottom 3, but they've got real issues there. You know, you saw the party with the players in Copenhagen last week. That just smacked of ill discipline. I think it was Connor Cody came out after the game on Saturday and just said that they're not in a good place right now. And will Van Nistelrooy be a success? Well, you know, Martin will tell you this, you just get in our job when you're exposed to these guys, you just get a little bit of an instinct. And from what I've seen and heard of Van Nistelrooy so far, I'll be honest, he doesn't really smack me as a Premier League manager. He spent these couple of weeks caretaker charge at Old Trafford dressed up as a Cluedo suspect. Now, that's got nothing to do with how he will subsequently perform as a manager, but you just get this instinct, this feel. Certainly guys over in Holland who I've spoken to, they're convinced he will be a success, but he has got a big job on his hands now at Leicester, and we wish him all the best.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder how much the 2 wins over Leicester in his interim spell was, you know, a bit of an audition or convince them that he could be the man to get them back up the Premier League. What do you make of the appointment, Martin?
Yeah, I can see why it's somebody they may go for because he's a big name. He's got a bit of pedigree. He did okay in his caretaker role, but I do think he says he's hurt, but the way Manchester United, the situation at Manchester United, I think that there was no way they could take the risk on him. He's too unproven, really, and that they needed someone who has got the sort of track record that Ruben Amorim had. So, yeah, he's hurt, but I think it's probably a better move for him than staying as part of the being an assistant at Old Trafford. I think he can at least prove himself, and if he can get Leicester back up the table and away from that relegation zone, then he can put himself into a situation, because he's still young, isn't he? And that in years to come, perhaps he can go back to Old Trafford if he can prove himself. But it's a testing ground, and he needs to come through this.
Yeah, you both mentioned that it's a difficult job. Testing is the word you used there, Martin. Craig, your thoughts about Van Nistelrooy's ability to get Leicester away from that drop zone? Do you think he's able to do that?
Well, we don't know, and that is why we're having this debate now, because if you look at what Martin touched on it there, from my own instinct, from what I've seen of him, I wouldn't be as convincing from what you heard when he was in charge of Manchester United during press conferences. But then, as I mentioned before, I've spoken to guys back in Holland. Of course, I think he had an incredible win percentage when he was with PSV, really high up in the 60s there. So to that end, he's got this want. He's clearly got a desire to be a manager, and if he's going to back himself, then, as I said, all the best to him. And it isn't a perilous situation. They're not stuck there in the bottom three. I think they're 2 points outside the bottom three. So, and they've got some good players there. Steve Cooper went in the summer, and it didn't really work from the off. That chemistry between Cooper and the dressing room wasn't there. If Van Nistelrooy can hit upon that, then of course he can pull them clear. Absolutely no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, it's mentioned on the back page of your paper as well, Craig. Ruud my hurt at United X. But alongside that, and the big headline there really, Martin, is we're coming for you, Pep. It's Gary Neville having a go at Manchester City, kind of poking fun after what happened at Anfield, because, of course, one of the standout ties is the class of '92 owned Salford City against Manchester City.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of really great ties in the FA Cup third round, but I'm sure there'll be a lot of focus on this one, because it's not quite Manchester United against Manchester City, but it's the next best thing, and there's this sort of giant killing possibility as well. Manchester City not being in a great place, and Gary Neville, he said, you're getting sacked in the morning, he said on Twitter, which was a reference to what the cop was singing at Pep Guardiola at Anfield, and he responded by putting up 6 fingers to show the number of Premier League titles he had. So it's talking about raising the stakes, and the bragging rights is going to be something quite special.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got more to go through, and we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at more of the back pages, including this in the Sun. Walk on through the rain after Liverpool lost Kyle and Co. Val Pep will keep on fighting. You're watching Back Pages tonight, and welcome back to Martin Ziegler of The Times and the Daily Mail's Craig Hope. We're looking at the story in the top corner of the Sun on the back page. Ruben Amorim saying no chance. I don't think I've ever heard this before, Martin. A manager asking fans not to chant his name.
No, so Manchester United fans, they've been singing his name to the tune of "Give It Up," the 1982 song by Casey and the Sunshine Band. So I don't know if it's the fact maybe he's not the biggest fan of the Sunshine Band, but either that or he's embarrassed about it. But it's a strange thing to say, "Please don't sing my name." I mean, he was saying he wants the fans to sing about the players, about the squad and the team, rather than him. Which I can see he's trying to maybe being a bit modest, but I think it's only a bit of fun, isn't it?
Martin, I am deeply disappointed. I thought you were going to sing the song for us.
I wouldn't inflict that on anybody.
It's unusual, isn't it, Craig? Managers don't usually ask fans to not sing about them.
Yeah, listen, I go back to what I said about Ruud van Nistelrooy before the break there, and as a journalist, you get a feel, good or otherwise, for managers, and everything I've seen and heard from Ruben Amorim so far has been good. Honestly, you get a nice feel from him. I think he's had a really impressive start as Manchester United manager. But I'm not having this. I'm really not. Come on, he says that don't sing my name and support the players. by singing a manager's name, by extension, that is a support of the players. It's creating a good vibe inside a stadium. And I tell you guys, when he's got to start worrying for real is when they aren't singing his name or when they're singing for him to go. If I was him, for now, I would embrace it. I would enjoy it. I would encourage supporters to sing it, not tell them to stop.
Yeah, it's very different in his character than what we expect. I think initially he talked about, being anxious in one of his pre-match interviews. He wasn't really sure what to expect of the game. I think he'd been asking players to play in different positions than perhaps what they had been doing previously, and he wasn't really sure how it was going to work out. It's different, it's refreshing. There is an openness and an honesty about him, I think, that has impressed many of us. Is that your impression of him, Craig?
Yeah, for sure.
Or Martin, sorry.
Well, yeah, I'll go in. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think he's been a breath of fresh air. I like the fact that when he was asked, because he always plays a 3-4-3 formation, and he was asked in one of his first press conferences, would he consider playing something else to fit in with the squad? And he just said no. It's 3-4-3, no plan B, and I like that sort of refreshing honesty. And I think I think he is the manager that Manchester United have been looking for. I mean, I'm not going to say he's going to win the Premier League in the next 2 seasons, but I think he is somebody they can put their faith into, and he's going to bring success in the longer term.
You agree, Craig?
I do, yeah. And I think, listen, it's not the greatest yardstick, a home fixture against Everton, but certainly what he's done so far. And you looked at that game on Sunday, they were excellent. They were very good, and they seemed to be playing with a little bit of freedom, a little bit of adventure there. And of all the appointments post Alex Ferguson, I come back to that word, instinct, and what we've seen and what we've heard of him so far. I think they've got the best chance with this guy of just dragging them away from, what is it now, 11 years of just stuck on this cycle of doom, really, of false hope, of managers come in and supporters and everyone convincing themselves this is going to be the one, and it hasn't worked out. Listen, it's a big job. It's a hell of a big job. But certainly from what we've seen so far, I think he's handled himself really well and with a real humility now. He's gone a little bit too far with the humility and trying to be too humble by telling supporters not to sing his name. But nonetheless, he comes across as a real decent man who knows what he is, knows what he wants, and I think players will buy into that.
Craig is not having any of the don't chant my name stuff. So let's stick with you, Craig, because the back page of the Sun, the headline's pretty cheeky. Walk on through the rain, obviously referencing that You'll Never Walk Alone anthem at Anfield, where Manchester City lost again. And it's basically saying that the City players will keep on fighting and they're backing Pep Guardiola. Uncharted territory for all of them. I don't think we expected anything less than a backing from the players still. What did you think of the story?
Well, as a journalist, Julia, you always ask yourself, if the opposite is said, is it a better story? And if Manchester City's players are asked the question, are you backing Pep? And they say, well, no, actually we're not. We've got problems in the dressing room, which may well be the truth. That's the better story. If they come out and they're asked a question, are you still behind the manager? What are they going to say? Come on. So in terms of, to answer your question, Julia, with regards the story, I don't think players can say anything else, can they? And just to go back to something we actually touched on earlier with regards the FA Cup draw, and I heard one pundit say this is the last thing Pep Guardiola needs, a home tie against Salford City. I would argue it's exactly what Pep Guardiola needs right now. He needs all the winnable matches he can get. And the big thing about the game on Sunday was that it wasn't a surprise. And before that match, I did a podcast for the Daily Mail last week, and I said then that I was absolutely convinced they would lose. I think Pep Guardiola, Manchester City, have been caught sleeping on the job. And you looked at the team on Sunday, the 1-11, I don't actually think it's a brilliant team. This isn't a blip. What happened last November? Now, that was a blip when they had 4 without a win, which included 1 loss and 3 draws. This run now, this is symptomatic of where they are actually at. And they, for me, this season have got absolutely no chance of getting back into the title race. And it's just as well Pep signed that 2-year extension, because I do think there's a rebuild on his hand here. It's not just going to be a continuation of those titles. This squad needs surgery.
Let's stick with that theme of managers under pressure, because the Guardian back page has on the side here, West Ham look to Conceição as Lopetegui pressure grows. And that's linking the Londoners with move for former Porto coach Sergio Conceição. It's an interesting one, but you can understand why, can't you, Martin? There's talks about Lopetegui's job and him being under pressure.
Yeah, I mean, he seemed to be under sort of huge pressure and then sort of achieved this fantastic result up at Newcastle, which Craig probably watched in the flesh. But then it all sort of went to pot again when they were absolutely taken to pieces by Arsenal. I mean, on the other hand, Arsenal hitting really good form. They're a really good team, and the fact that they can go up to St James's Park and get that sort of result must show something. So I'd be surprised if he, on the back of that Arsenal result, he gets sacked. But obviously we got matches this week, so that could prove pivotal. But I still think it's hanging in the balance. But yeah, Sergio Conceição done very well with Porto, hasn't he? Over several seasons, won the title there in Portugal several times. So I'm sure, I'm not surprised at all that he would be under consideration.
Now, Craig, I was at the London Stadium on Saturday, and even though Lopetegui was suspended, so he wasn't on the bench, afterwards, you could see him, and understandably, obviously, not happy. What was his demeanour in that Newcastle match that Martin had just mentioned? Because I think you were there.
I was there, yeah. Now, his demeanour pre-match and post-match were very different. Before the game, I was sat in the press box and I watched him walk out onto the pitch with his players. He didn't walk with his players, and actually I captured this on video. He went alone and wandered around the stadium, and he looked like a man who was contemplating, pondering the meaning of life, really. He didn't seem to have a great deal of confidence in his own body language. Now, subsequently, they went out and beat Newcastle 2-0. What I would say about that game is it was as much Newcastle losing as it was West Ham winning. I didn't really get the feeling West Ham had come there and done a job on Newcastle. But post-match, you come across as a very likeable fella. He was in good humour. But what we then saw at home to Arsenal on Saturday, I do think that is more reflective of perhaps where West Ham are right now under Lopetegui. Saying that, they've still got some good players. Jared Bowen was excellent up at St James's Park, and you look at the fixtures they've got coming up, starting with Leicester now, and they've actually got a really winnable run, and you wouldn't be surprised if he does stay in a job beyond Christmas, because I get the impression the West Ham board actually do want to change a manager. You see these stories leaking out, 2 games to save your job. There's usually a reason they appear rather, but I think he might just hang around.
Well, let's go 3 for 3 for managers who are under pressure, shall we? Because in the Telegraph, there's a story about embarrassed Rooney fighting to save Plymouth job ahead of 2 key games. Break it down for us, Martin.
Yeah, Wayne Rooney, talking Ruud van Nistelrooy, old Manchester United hero, another one, Wayne Rooney, finding how difficult management can be. And yes, look at the, I think it was at 4-0 they lost to Bristol City, and then that was on the back of a 6-1 defeat by Norwich. So it's really, really tough down there for him in the southwest. I think he's said himself, I think the youth team could have done better against Norwich, but it just illustrates the fact that you can be the one of the best players of your generation, but managing, coaching, it's a completely different game, and you need to have different talents. And I do feel a bit sorry for him, because it's you're used to this success at the top level. You drop down to a lower division and you struggle.
Thank you so much, Martin and Craig. We've got to leave it there. That's all we have time for. If you missed any of the show, there's another chance to see Backpages tonight at 1:30, and the show's also available as a podcast. Just download Backpages on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.